Thank you for joining us today to talk a little bit about domain strategy. My name is Matt Crowley. I'm the Vice President of Digital Services at More Visibility. I oversee three of the teams inside our organization that include the SEO team, the analytics team, the design development team, and Ashley, who spearheads the SEO team, here to join us and talk a little bit about domain strategy, in particular from the content strategy and user experience side of the fence. So Ashley, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks. My name is Ashley Scharber, SEO and Content here at More Visibility. My background is mostly in the content side of things, but have a lot of experience holistically looking at SEO for most of our clients. So excited to talk about this topic.
Awesome. So I know this has been an area of focus that we've seen a lot of organizations work in recently and talk about recently, and that we've helped with, and you've spearheaded a lot of strategies around this recently. So I thought before we dive too into the weeds, it'd be good to just talk about it at a very high level. When we talk about domain strategy, what is it that we're talking about? And oftentimes it relates to whether or not an organization should have one domain or multiple domains. And I know there's never a one-size-fits-all solution, but how do you think about whether an organization should have one domain, whether it should have multiple domains? What are some of the key considerations at the highest level when making some of those decisions, especially from a content strategy and user experience perspective?
Yeah, I think there's a few different things that businesses and organizations should really think about. One is really kind of from a brand perspective, how do they want to represent their brand? And what we've run into, or kind of some of the conversations that we've had with some of our clients recently, is, they've had multiple subdomains. And so really from a brand perspective, they're kind of fragmenting themselves a little too much, with so many separate websites that are all under the same umbrella. Really not, they're distinct in service area maybe, but that's about it. And kind of from a user experience perspective, can create a very isolating experience where it's hard to navigate between the different areas. You get stuck on one site, don't know how to get elsewhere. You don't get to see the full picture of everything that they offer, which especially for some of the healthcare clients that we work with, they're pretty large, they're pretty robust, and that's an asset. And so when you have a lot of different subdomains that create a very segmented experience, you're missing out on that larger holistic story that you could be telling. And then from an SEO perspective, you're also likely missing out as well. Search engines do view even subdomains as entirely separate websites. And so you can lose out a little bit on some of the value that you could get from a main domain just from some of your factors like inbound links and things like that, that again are being distributed across multiple domains instead of all going to one domain and really helping boost the entire site. You're now kind of segmenting that out a little bit more than you probably should.
And I know you mentioned healthcare, which certainly this is an area that pretty like almost every sector at some point in their life cycle deals with, but healthcare, it seems like for whatever reason, has been a big area of focus of late. It seems like largely that's been sort of dovetailed with a lot of the consumerization of healthcare, and a lot of healthcare organizations trying to go through a digital transformation process and how they can best align to their patients or potential patients' user experience, which has been great to see that they've placed such a bigger emphasis on that experience before they come into the actual health system, and what that experience is like from the very, very, very beginning stages when they're just looking online and coming across the brand and their website or their web presence. And so using that, since it is, I think, a good sort of case study or example where an industry has really focused on the consumer, in this case, the patient or potential patient, what their experience is, and really prioritize that and then look to make a lot of change. And oftentimes, healthcare organizations have many different types of services that have very different needs in terms of what to communicate to those patients, also very different and opinionated stakeholders that want their own sort of presence or branding or look and feel or experience when it might come to something like orthopedics versus cancer, which can be very, very different and have very different belief systems in terms of who's running those components of the organization. So it can get pretty messy. And again, as always, there's no one size fits all solution. But a big area that I know we've seen has been the consolidation from many domains to one domain for some of the reasons that you were talking about earlier. And so when that is the case and an organization either wants to do that or is asking us what's the best solution, and I know in this case, oftentimes it is to consolidate into a single domain. When that decision has been made to do the consolidation, what are some of the things that are important to consider? What does that type of project look like or entail? What has been your experience? And just if you can talk through some of those key big picture considerations to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the most recent experiences we've had with some of our clients that's kind of been interesting for me, being a little bit more involved in them, is that how much content strategy really should be going into a migration. And I think a lot of people maybe don't think about that because they're very focused on the technical requirements and getting everything set up, which is important, obviously. But I think you can create a smoother transition if you really think about it from a content and really a user perspective. And really making sure that you're considering, especially if you're getting rid of subdomains or maybe other websites, really thinking about where you're redirecting that content so that it's a really smooth transition process. And if somebody has bookmarked that page, or maybe somebody else was linking to it and they're expecting, a detailed piece of content on brain cancer, for example, and they follow that link and end up on your homepage, it's not really a great experience. You're probably going to lose that person and that potential patient. So really thinking about what patients are going to experience if they try to go to that other site and then end up on a new site or a different site, and kind of what that experience looks like in their eyes.
And so when they start embarking on this process, and as you said, content strategy and user experience is such a critical part of the process, and I know it varies, but what are some of the first things that you would do? What are some of the first things that would be an important part of the process?
Yeah, I think first step is to just inventory all of your content and really have a good understanding of what exists today, and really go through the process of thinking through what should be carried over and fully migrated, what you're going to remove, maybe what needs to be consolidated together, and putting together a plan based off of that. And that can be a very manual process, and I think it needs to be. Unfortunately, as much as we'd love to automate things, I do think you kind of have to go through and evaluate things, because really you do need to think about, if someone was intending to go to this page and now they're going to end up here, how do I make that a smooth transition? And that is, number one, make sure you've mapped your content in a way that makes sense. So if you're talking about cancer here, make sure you're linking them over to another cancer or redirecting to a cancer page. And one area that I think people maybe don't always think about is, redirect mapping is a kind of common thing that everybody has to do, but you also have to think about the content too. And so if I've redirected someone to this new web page, they were expecting I'm going to talk about this. Am I actually talking about that on that page? Making sure that you're still meeting their needs, even though they're on a new website. And also, I think making sure that one thing that has come up a lot, I think, within healthcare, especially, is if you're, a lot of sites tend to migrate through brand acquisitions. We've seen this recently too with some of our clients, and something that I think gets forgotten a lot is the brand consideration. If you're going through that acquisition and that legacy site maybe needs to come down and all that content needs to migrate over, well, you need to think about your brand voice of the content. Is there consistency there so that it doesn't feel like the patient's looking at your different services and kind of evaluating you, that you're kind of on different websites, even though they're on the same website, because you're talking about things differently. But then also too, if that brand maybe no longer exists or got, consolidated into a larger umbrella area, do you even mention that hospital or that brand on your website? Because even though in your mind it's different or it's gone, it takes a little bit longer for patients to kind of make that connection, and they're probably still searching for that. What are they going to come up with if they do search for that? Making sure that you're editing your content and really thinking through the bigger picture as well, not just, oh, where am I sending people, but also what are they going to find when they get there? Are they going to be shocked, or are they going to have a nice seamless experience?
So some of the words that stood out to me were audit, evaluate, edit, consider. I thought we were just supposed to create all this content, just write more content, and we could just take these websites and put them together, and then just we've got all this kind of, we just create more content. But it sounds like a really big part of the process is what you said, which is audit, evaluate, inventory, figure out what we have today, and then make changes to what already exists so that it fits together more appropriately, which sounds really great in theory, but I know that oftentimes, big area of focus, although at the highest level, people are saying, we want to do this for brand experience. That's a lot of work and a lot of effort. And so it's important to consider, what's really worth it in the end run and what's sort of the cost benefit analysis, because that is a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And so if an organization were to just take all these divergent subdomains or web properties, or like you said, a big theme is acquisitions, expanded presences and geographies, going into new areas and counties and cities, both acquisitions of really large hospitals and individual freestanding clinics. At the end of the day, when it comes to what is oftentimes the digital KPI or area of focus, which is patient acquisition and digital appointments and scheduling and all of that sounds good, but is that really important to help with that? Can't we just put it all together and then focus on SEO later or separately? Does that really have anything to do? Does it matter? Is there any relation there for long-term success with actual organizational KPIs, or are these separate things? Is it nice fuzzy user experience and then really we could be spending our time on SEO for the actual KPIs, or are these related?
I think it's all connected. You kind of can't have one without the other. And really, if our goal is patient acquisition and you've gotten rid of an old website, you didn't spend time mapping where the redirects are going to go, you put everything back, pointed to the homepage or to a top level page, you're likely going to lose a lot of potential patients that way, because I'm expecting to maybe find some very specific article or learn about a particular service, and now I'm on this top level page. You're putting a lot of effort on that potential patient to now search your website, try to navigate to find what they were originally looking for. And chances are they're not going to want to do that. I wouldn't if I were someone looking for that. And so if you put the effort in early on to map everything, create that positive experience, help get them where they need to go, help them find what they need to find, you make that path to conversion, path to making an appointment much smoother, a little bit easier, take some of the burden off of them of trying to figure out what even happened, and make it as smooth as possible for them to get to where they want to go, figure out how to make an appointment, learn more about your service or whatever the case may be, find the doctor they're looking for, and towards that conversion point.
Awesome. So sort of in summary, it sounds like, and you can tell me if I'm, misquoting you here, missummarizing you, but at the end of the day, if there is some sort of big domain consolidation, and or even if it's smaller, like just an acquisition, and that has to get integrated into the main website, that the area where you would place the most time, emphasis, and focus would really be in the audit, planning, review stage, to make sure that what ends up coming out on the back end is something that's going to be a good long-term fit and a good long-term positive experience for the site. And it shouldn't be that we say, okay, we'll just pick it up and drop it in and then figure it out. That really the bulk of the planning of the bulk of the time and energy should be spent on audit, planning, strategy, and considering what exists today, how the other piece fits in, and then what the user experience will look like once that other piece or multiple pieces fits in. Would you say that's accurate?
I do think so, yes. I think picking up, like you said, pick it up and set it over is kind of not a great experience. And really, you do need to think about not just page level, but the overarching site strategy too. And, maybe it can all come over and fit into one section on the site, but maybe you need to kind of spread it out. Maybe you had location pages on that subdomain that now need to go into your locations directory. Otherwise, the patients won't ever find them. Maybe your services need to go into your services content. So it does come down to like really, how does it fit into your information architecture logically from a patient experience perspective? Can they navigate to it? Is it well linked to? Where is the most appropriate place for that content to live and kind of be truly integrated into a real experience, not just kind of then you go from multiple subdomains to a hodgepodge website. It's not really a great experience.
Yeah. And I would assume, although it's probably like underlying a lot of what you've talked about, we've heard a lot about, or most people have probably heard a lot, at least in the SEO or digital world, about a lot of the recent algorithm updates from Google related to helpful content, which I'm assuming underlies a lot of this, that if you're just picking up something and dropping it in, it's probably not going to be helpful for the end user, and therefore is probably going to have some sort of negative impact in the new world, or I guess we've been in this world for a long time, but the bigger, as these algorithm changes continue to focus more and more on user experience, that's only going to hurt you longer term, and you're just going to have to go fix it later. So why not put the plans in place now?
Yeah, definitely. I think content's been king for a long time now, and that's not going anywhere. We experienced that with one of our clients. They acquired a hospital. That hospital had a lot of content, but I'd consider it thin content. So we kind of had to evaluate, is there anything that's really worth truly bringing over and kind of creating new content around and new pages around? Or is it really, no, we're just kind of getting rid of it entirely, and we're just going to now talk about that hospital on this page. And we're going to only have a single page, or maybe we need to entirely rewrite them because we don't really want to bring that poor content over onto our site.
Awesome. So if there was any, maybe one last thing, either that you want to reemphasize that we talked about or that we haven't talked about, but you want to leave everyone with, if they're thinking about what their domain universe is, or domain consolidation, or some sort of acquisition, or restructuring their site based on a lot of what we've talked about, what's the one thing, if you had to pick anything, that you would want to leave people with?
I think it's all about patient experience. And really, that's number one. If you lead with that, everything else will fall into place, if you will, and will become pretty logical type of thing that you'll need to do as you kind of think about it from patient first. Makes it a little bit easier.
I think that's great. And I was going to probably say a very similar thing, but maybe in a slightly different way. That I know one of the things that we often encounter is like, all of these big strategic plans make a lot of sense to us, but sometimes it's difficult for different people to visualize that. And that at the end of the day, taking that and then just thinking through, okay, if you land on this page, where do you go next? Okay, you click here, and then what does that look like? And where do you go next? And you click. And oftentimes what ends up happening if you just take things and just drop them together is that you realize very quickly that it's not obvious where someone would want to go, or what their options would be, or that it takes them 6 or 7 or 8 steps to reach what should be 1 step or 2 steps into the process. And that patient experience is much worse if you just dump things in, as opposed to planning that all out strategically. So visualizing it, I think, is a good way, and just asking the question of, okay, if someone lands on this page, where would we want them to go next? And then with this plan, whether we're just bringing it in as is or we've created a strategic plan, where do they go next, and are those options, easily presented to them?
Yeah, definitely. That user journey is very valuable to think through and really make sure we get people where they need to go and where we want them to go to.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thank you very much for talking us through this today. If anybody is going through this and could use some help, don't hesitate to reach out to our email address, info@morevisibility.com, or fill a form on our website or give us a phone call. Thanks, Ashley. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.